Ellen, our spokesperson meeting. Everybody, welcome to Senior Roundtable. And you see that Mac, our Zoom producer, has hit the button to record this. We'll post it next week on YouTube. So you have that available to you if you have anybody that you are working with or colleagues or whatever that you would like them to benefit from this topic today, which we're really excited about. A couple things. Our meeting sponsor today is Catherine Noggle. And Noggle, am I saying it correctly?
You are, yep.
Oh, how about that? There you go. I'm gonna have to get a lotto ticket today, Catherine.
Exactly.
So you'll hear from her a little bit later, and they are sponsoring our 2 door prizes that we'll be giving away at the end of the session today. So you'll hear more about that here shortly. And a couple of folks that I want to acknowledge without a doubt is I am Laura Steigelman. I've got a company called Forward Training Solutions, and I have been unbelievably honored and fortunate to be with Senior Roundtable as the facilitator for the last, believe it or not, 16 years. We had our 15th anniversary last year. That's how I know the math, that this must be 16 years. So behind the scenes is Elder Source. And if you are in this sector, so working with seniors, disabilities, any of those kinds of things, and if you have not connected with Elder Source, absolutely want to encourage you to do that. They are amazing. They are just our go-to for everything that we need for Senior Roundtable. They run all of the email lists behind the scenes. They put those pretty email invites together. They send them out. They manage the list, etc. So if you're not on the email list for the meetings, which are every other month, please feel free to reach out to them. And if you don't know their contact information, we'll eventually put that in the chat box for you. And then lastly, this was started by the Community Foundation. They started getting more into the senior sector as far as giving grants. Probably 17 years ago. And as a result, realized that people in this market or in this sector needed a chance to know who else is doing what. So I might be working with somebody and they have a client that needs wheelchair ramps, but I don't do that. Maybe my organization doesn't do that, but the person down the street does, but I don't even know about them because I'm busy with my own work and my own clients. So the Community Foundation started this group with the opportunity for folks to network with each other, which we've always continued to keep as a big part of these meetings, getting a chance to say hello to each other. And then we always bring a program that people have either asked for or suggested to say, what's a topic that everybody would be interested in, help you in your job and help you in your knowledge of the community and the different sectors that you're involved in that elder folks. So that is the Community Foundation. Janet Ellen may be with us here today. I can't see everyone's pictures yet, but Janet, if you're here, give us a wave. And Janet is with the Community Foundation. Again, if you're not following them, what they're doing in the community, it's very just unbelievable, the kinds of things that they do, especially in that senior sector. So welcome to everybody on that. For some reason, my slide stopped going. So if you're able to keep your video on, we appreciate it. There's nothing, I'll speak for myself, Pam, because you may be completely fine with it, but there's nothing harder than talking to 12 blank squares. So if you are in a situation where you can keep your video on and you're willing to do that, we love it. Even if you're drinking your coffee or having your biscuit or whatever, we're completely okay with that. It's just nice having some facial expressions, some head nods and things like that. So again, I'll speak for myself, but Pam, I know that you probably as a facilitator also appreciate that. Zoom ruler, I mentioned that at the bottom of the page. So you've got that. If you want to mute yourself, unmute yourself. If you want to see what's going on in the chat box, you can see that Arthur, Lori, several other folks have already put some stuff in the chat box. So that'll be going while we're in the meetings today. And if you don't have your name under your video, if you would please do so from a networking standpoint, so people know who you are. And if you want to make sure you include your first and last name, and if you want to add your organization, you can do that too. The way you will do that is just hover with your mouse over your own picture. You will see 3 dots pop up. Click on those 3 dots, and there's a rename option. And if you're not able to figure that out, it is early in the morning. I'm just on my 2nd cup of coffee. I know it sounds like I probably have had 5, but this is my normal rate of speech, sadly. So if you need help with that, let the person know in the chat box that you don't know how to rename it or you need some help. And Mac, who is our Zoom producer behind the scenes, will take care of that for you. And today's meeting is recorded, and we will put that next week on our YouTube channel. So you've got that as well. Okay. So who are we? For show of hands, who is at their very first Senior Roundtable meeting? By show of hands. Very first, welcome, welcome. And show of hands, if you're off video for whatever reason, if you want to do a question or anything like that, you've got on your slide ruler You have something that you can do, emoticons that you can raise your hand and those kinds of things if you want to. So who Senior Roundtable is, as you can see, it's a coalition of anybody who is interested that focuses on elders. We have sometimes people just attend the meetings because they care for somebody who's an elder, family member, a friend, a neighbor, something like that, or they volunteer in the senior sector, or they work in the senior sector. So whatever that reason is, we are just happy that you're here, and we're happy that you're here as part of the network of all of the people who care and, really are passionate about the senior sector. And also, we always want a good program for you that you say that would be really interesting, and it's just good for me to know. I know me personally, I have learned so much from these meetings, and I don't have anybody immediately. I did have my mom for quite a few years that I use a lot of this stuff with, but there are so many things that I have gained from here that I've been able to share with friends who are taking care of elders or people in the elder sector. So thank you for everybody who's ever suggested a program or been part of a program. And of course, Pam, our speaker here today. So that is who we are, and that is what we do. Here is what we're going to be doing today as far as our agenda. We'll have organizational announcements. You'll hear more about that in just a second. We're then going to hear from our meeting sponsor. You'll have a chance to network with one another and say hello in a couple of the breakout rooms. And then we'll move into our program that you can see there with Pam. And then we'll wrap up with those two $25 gift cards from our meeting sponsor. And that is how we will end our meeting. So if you have any senior sector announcements and you just want to introduce yourself and tell us what you do, where you work, etc., you will have a chance to do that in some breakout rooms, but you may not get to everybody that's here, and they may not know what you do or where you work or what your connection is to the senior sector. So please feel free to put that in the chat box as we roll through the class today, through the session today. Please feel free to put information in there. And if you have something coming up, if you have I always love to use this, the senior prom, City of Jacksonville, any of those kinds of things that you think others would benefit from, and maybe they would tell others about it also, please feel free to do that. And then again, feel free to introduce yourself there as well. We also have a LinkedIn group for us, and it's called the Northeast Florida Senior Roundtable. And Mac, if you don't mind, if you may have done that already, would you mind putting that in the chat box in case anybody wants to grab that and join us at some point? And it really is an opportunity for you if you say, who is that really great meeting sponsor? Her name was Catherine. I can't remember what her last name was. You can look in this group and you can probably find Catherine in there, and it would be a way for you to continue connecting with one another after the session is over today. And also, we do post, Pam sent us a handout. We'll be putting that in the LinkedIn group, etc. So again, it's an opportunity for you to continue connecting and posting events that you may have coming up. So with that, I am going to turn it over to Catherine. Catherine is our meeting sponsor today. If you are a meeting sponsor, you get 3 minutes on the clock, and you also are providing those two $25 gift cards that we will give away randomly at the end of the session. So Catherine, I'm going to mute myself, and you've got the floor.
All right. Hi, I'm Catherine Naugle. I've met some of you, not all of you, but I am an estate planning, elder law, probate attorney. I have a practice in the Riverside Five Points area. I've been practicing for about 20 years. We focus mainly on those areas: estate planning, probate, trying to prevent probate, setting people up for, as they age, having the proper documents in place. I would love the opportunity to speak with any of you if you have questions about estate planning and what I recommend. I recommend that everybody has certain documents in place, and I'd much rather help them on the front end than help the family on the back end if something happens and they don't have the documents in place, because that can be very traumatic to family members. I will leave my information, and we do offer a free 30-minute initial consultation with estate planning. If you have customers, clients, yourself that you think you need to get that done, just feel free to call me, and I'm happy to talk to you about it.
Muted myself, Catherine. So thank you so much. And then I think, Catherine, you said you're going to put your information in the chat box.
I will.
So please be willing to do that. And Catherine has been with us as part of Senior Roundtable for, I'm going to say at least 10 years, Catherine, and we've met you since then, and has done multiple presentations for us about exactly what she just said. And she's just as awesome. So thank you so much for being our meeting sponsor today. We really appreciate it.
Thank you, Laura. Thank you for all you do with this. It's amazing.
No, it's the best job in the world, Catherine. It really is. I'm very fortunate. So thank you. Okay. And I do see Janet Ellen is in the house. I had a chance to pull open the participants and list here. So Janet, if you will give us a wave, you may have done that previously, and I just didn't have all my windows open on my first screen here. So some of you will get a chance to meet Janet as well. So we are ready to say hello to one another and an opportunity for you to grow your network. You'll have a couple of chances through breakout rooms. So I'll explain to you what the breakout room is for the first one. Let me go ahead and get everything up there. If you haven't put your information in the chat box yet, for those that didn't get a chance to meet you, or maybe somebody said, hey, can you give me your contact info? Please feel free to continue using the chat for the rest of the meeting. And with that, I am going to turn it over to our spokesperson today. Want to introduce Pamela. You saw her background in her bio when you signed up for the session today. So you've got all of that information there. And Pam, please feel free to do an additional kind of intro of yourself, anything that you think would be helpful for folks to know. Very happy to have her here today and that she was willing to take time out of her schedule to join us. And with that, I will stop sharing, Pam, and you've got the floor. And if you'll just let me share. Pam said it's great to ask questions, so feel free to do that. And you can put those in the chat box. She's going to keep an eye on that. I will do the same. Let me go ahead and move mine over. And if you've got questions, please put them in the chat box so you don't forget. And then she's going to get to them as she goes through. So Pam, with that, and this time I really mean it, you have the floor. I'm going to stop sharing and you got it.
Thank you. Give me just a moment and let me get my screen up.
And while Pam is getting settled, you may notice in the chat box, Mac has put in a document from Pam. So please feel free if you want to grab that, download it. We'll also send it next week when we send out the link to the recording for anybody who needs that. So you've got that there and you can just download that and save it if you would like to. And that is from Pam. And again, we'll send it out next week. All right. I really mean it now, Pam. I'm muting myself. You can actually look. The mute is
all right. Just assure me that my PowerPoint is showing.
It is.
Okay. Very, very good. So, well, I want to thank Laura and those of you from the Senior Roundtable for allowing me to be here with you today. As stated earlier, my name is Pam Williamson, and I'm the Assistant Director of the Southeast ADA Center. I was telling Laura this is a topic that's near and dear to my heart because I am the primary caretaker for my mother, who is 79 years old, and have been for the past 5 years. So this topic is very real to me, and I use it on a daily basis. So just a quick disclaimer, the contents of this presentation were developed with a grant from the National Institute on Disability, Independent Living, and Rehabilitation Research, and it's a center within the Administration on Community Living, U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. Our information is intended as informal guidance. It's not a legal information, nor are we an enforcement agency. Now, the Southeast ADA Center is a project of the Burton Blatt Institute at Syracuse University, and the Burton Blatt Institute is an international law and policy center, and we have information on the several laws, and we also do grant work on many projects. So we're also a member of the ADA National Network, and as stated earlier, we're funded by the National Institute on Disability, Independent Living, and Rehabilitation Research. We serve 8 states in the Southeast region: Alabama, Florida, Georgia, Kentucky, Mississippi, North Carolina, South Carolina, and Tennessee. Now, the ADA National Network is actually made up of 10 regional centers and the ADA Knowledge Translation Center. And these centers are built upon the same centers that the Department of Health and Human Services has. So they're built on the federal regions. And we provide information, informal guidance, and training on the Americans with Disabilities Act. And our whole goal is to make it possible for everyone with a disability to live a life of freedom and equality. So the map in front of you has the 10 centers across the nation. And as I mentioned earlier, we're Region 4, the Southeast ADA Center. We serve the most states, and we are the third largest in population. So we have a lot of work to do, and we're very fortunate to work with affiliates in each state in order to get our work done. So we believe in being able to build the capacity of our fellow organizations and work with organizations such as yours to be able to share information about the law. Now, if you take away anything from this presentation, I want you to make sure you have our toll-free number handy. It's 1-800-949-4232. So, because we do provide individualized assistance to answer specific ADA questions. So we have a team of ADA specialists who answer questions from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. Monday through Friday, and that's 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. Eastern Time. And so how we do this is that when you call in, you talk with an intake person who will take down your information, and then we will provide that information to an ADA specialist who will call you back and discuss your specific situation. We do this so that we can provide very dedicated time to you and make sure that we can answer your questions. We also provide informational materials on the law through national and regional websites, and we do this in print formats. The information is also available in Spanish, and this can be found at the national website www.adata.org. And then we do customized regional and national trainings on the Americans with Disabilities Act, just like we're doing today. So today we're going to focus in on 2 federal laws and 1 Supreme Court decision. We're going to look at the Fair Housing Act, the Americans with Disabilities Act, and the Olmstead Decision, which is the Supreme Court decision. Now, the Fair Housing Act, is the Fair Housing Act covers apartments, multifamily housing, and other places, such as this. And if the housing is built with federal monies, the Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act also applies. Now, the Americans with Disabilities Act may cover things such as the public area, such as a clubhouse, the leasing office, or a swimming pool or a laundry room. So we have to be able to look at this from a broad perspective and how things apply. So what does the Fair Housing Act require? Well, first of all, it's a non-discrimination on the basis of race, color, religion, national origin, sex, family status, or disability. It also promotes choice for seniors with disabilities to choose where they want to live. And it also says that seniors with disabilities are entitled to live in integrated communities with their neighbors. So seniors with disabilities, as we all know, should be treated with the same dignity and respect as others and have the equal opportunity of the full use of their home and common areas without intimidation from property owners or other residents. So where does the Fair Housing Act apply and who must apply? So it applies to all aspects of housing, including rental properties and purchasing a home. The Fair Housing Act prohibits discrimination by direct providers of housing, such as landlords and real estate companies, as well as other entities such as municipalities, banks, or other lending institutions, homeowners insurance companies, and HOAs and COAs. Generally, they cannot discriminate against families with children, except in federally funded housing programs for seniors in the 55 plus or 62 plus communities. And then those housing providers must have at least 80% of their housing designated for this specific age group. Now, when we're looking at fair housing, so we have to look at the various types of discrimination that might occur. And we'll discuss the failure to provide reasonable accommodation and the failure to allow a reasonable modification on the next slide. So, but the failure to meet design and construction accessibility requirements in new multifamily housing might be considered discrimination. And then intentional discrimination against a person because of his or her disability. There also are the different types of discrimination might be the refusal to rent property to an individual because they have a disability, denying an apartment that's available, advertising only to certain groups of people, charging a different amount for the same type of apartment, or threatening, coercing, or intimidating anyone exercising a fair housing right or assisting others in exercising their rights. So the other thing that we have to be on the lookout for is disparate impact or disparate treatment. And this is a type of unlawful discrimination. And it means that the behavior towards someone is unequal because of a protected characteristic under a civil rights law. An example of disparate impact means that an apartment might require applicants to have full-time employment, which could potentially discriminate against older adults or people with disabilities. Now, under the Fair Housing Act, so we have reasonable accommodations and reasonable modifications. And accommodations are changes to policies, such as we don't assign parking spaces. It's first come, first serve. So, but a resident with a mobility disability might need to park close to their building. And if so, then the landlord or property owner must allow this as an accommodation. Now, other types of accommodations might be allowing someone to put their trash can near their entrance versus putting it in the dumpster if they can't reach the dumpster due to a disability. So, or allowing so a person to mail their rent and instead of taking it to the rental office or paying it in another way due to their disability. Now, modifications are structural changes that need to be made to the property when the tenant needs to have something such as a ramped entrance, so safety bars in the bathtub area, or wants to have a pool chair installed. Now, the tenant is then responsible for any cost associated with changes to the property, both inside and outside the unit and in the common area, if it's a reasonable modification. And the landlord or the property owner can also ask that the tenant put the place back to the original state when they move out. So, however, that doesn't mean they're going to ask for it to be done, because if it's made accessible, then they may want to keep it in that way. Now, oftentimes, so persons with disabilities or folks who are older adults may need a live-in aid. And under the Fair Housing Act, so a person who needs a live-in aid must be essential to the care and well-being of the person and is not obligated for the support of the person and would not be living in the unit except to provide necessary support services. It becomes very important when we look at things such as income. So, for example, the aide's income should not be looked at when determining a household income. So if on income-based housing, and housing agencies must ensure that a live-in aid is necessary for the support of the person with the disability before excluding their income. And then the housing agency can generally require that the applicant or tenant document the necessity for a live-in aid. Now, this is one of my favorite subjects of service animals and emotional support animals. So now I am a dog lover. So matter of fact, my dog is currently sitting at my feet. So, but my dog is not a service animal, and although he provides emotional support for me, so he would not qualify as an emotional support animal. So, but under the Fair Housing Act, even in a no pet or pet restricted community, and when we say pet restricted, that means breed restrictions or size restrictions, residents must be permitted to have their service dog or emotional support animal with proper documentation and if it is reasonable. Now, emotional support animals are not limited to dogs. So, the Housing and Urban Development says that domesticated animals can be emotional support animals. And also, too, when looking at taking documentation, we have a plethora of internet based companies out there now that are providing documentation. So, housing providers do not need to accept this type of internet documentation. They can require that a medical care provider or other provider have a relationship with the resident and require documentation from that medical care provider. Now, if there is a complaint, the Fair Housing Act is enforced with the Department of Housing and Urban Development, or you can also file a complaint with the state or local human relations agency under the state civil rights law. In Florida, you do have a state human rights commission, and that they do take complaints in this area. So it's an area where you can file a complaint. And alternative dispute resolution and mediation are also encouraged because you can typically get to a faster uh, conclusion and when you to go through alternative dispute resolution or mediation. Now, I want to leave you with several resources on the Fair Housing Act before we move on. So we have 4 slides here with information on various things that we have discussed. And now I'm going to stop and take a look at the chat. Looks like we may have a few questions. So let me see if I can manage that.
I don't see questions yet, Pam. There's Zoom producer did put in some of the contact information that you shared a little bit earlier.
Excellent.
I had a question. I am curious, what kind of, besides dogs and probably cats, what have you guys seen for emotional support animals that were interesting?
We have, so a tip, like again, has to typically be a domesticated animal. So dogs, cats, birds occasionally, so are considered emotional support animals. The Housing and Urban Development is pretty open on that and does not, they don't have an exhaustive list. They keep it pretty open by just saying domesticated animals. So we have to, so I tell people to use common sense when it comes to that and just make sure that they have documentation from their healthcare provider that the particular animal does provide emotional support for a person.
And then Pam, Lori just said, how do we get a hold of you? So when you're done today, if you would please share that with us at whatever point you want to make sure people know how to get a hold of you. That would be awesome.
I will have my contact information at the end of the presentation. And again, keep that toll-free number handy because that's the best way to find me.
Perfect. And then Patricia, HUD has a list for their facilities. I don't know, Patricia, if that's a question or if you're commenting on something. So feel free to unmute if there's something you want to add to that.
No, they have only 3 animals, cats, dogs, and a small pony.
Good. Okay, then thank you for that because they have updated that since the last time I looked at the list. So now that I do, so I appreciate you. I appreciate you.
Now it may have changed in 2024. but I did take a fair housing class last year.
Okay.
Last year.
Very good. Very good. Thank you for the information. We do have a question that says, what is the best way to dispute the online doctors who issue these certificates? The best way to dispute it is to tell the person that they must get documentation from a doctor or other medical professional with whom they have a relationship. You do not have to accept internet documentation. So and then we had then we have a person who said a patron at the Florida Theater tried to bring their emotional support miniature horse inside. So I'll address this a little bit more when we get into the Americans with Disabilities Act, because that's going to be because the definition of service animals a little different there. So we'll discuss that in just a moment. All right, so let's go on and talk about the Americans with Disabilities Act. First of all, it's a landmark civil rights law, and I want to underscore that it's a civil rights law that looks at providing full participation, equal opportunity, independent living, and economic self-sufficiency for people with disabilities. It prohibits discrimination on the basis of disability, and it's specifically in the areas of public accommodations, employment, state and local government agencies, transportations, and community living. So it was signed into law on July 26, 1990. So we just celebrated 34 years back in July, and it was amended on September 25th, 2008. Oops. There we go. The definition of disability under the ADA is a legal term. It's not a medical term. And so we have to be able to look at it in that context. It's different than Social Security, Veterans Administration, or workers' comp. And the first prong of that definition is a physical or mental impairment that substantially limits one or more major life activities. And major life activities can be things such as speaking, breathing, hearing, seeing, and so many more. And it also talks about our internal system, such as the immune system, the nervous system. So, and again, not an exhaustive list. So but these are physical or mental impairments that substantially limit one or more major life activities. Now, most disabilities are not obvious. So we have things such as arthritis, intellectual disabilities, HIV or AIDS, seizure disorders, substance use disorders, and dementia. And we need to keep in mind that folks who have invisible disabilities are covered just like folks who have visible disabilities. I am a person with a psychiatric disability. You can't see that. So it's very hidden. And unless I choose to disclose, as I do here, so you would not know that I had a psychiatric disability. And so we need to understand that we want to make sure that we acknowledge that people may have non-obvious disabilities, because we want to reduce the stigma that comes along with those. Now, the ADA actually has 3 prongs related to disability. And the first is that first one that we talked about is that you have to have a disability. And that's when you have a substantial limitation of a major life activity. The second prong is having a record of a disability. This may be someone who's had cancer and is now in remission, or has had a substance use disorder and is now in recovery. Or a person could be regarded as having a disability, and this might be a person who has had may have a birthmark or other type of scar on their face, and they don't have a substantial limitation to a major life activity, but they might be regarded as having a disability. So who is protected under the ADA? Now remember, we have to put this in the context of disability. And we've talked about the three types of disabilities. And older adults may or may not personally identify as having a disability. My mom is 79 years old and has several disabilities, but she nor her friends are going to identify in that category. So they look at it more as aging related information, and they may meet the ADA definition of disability and be covered. So we just have to help them look at it from a functional limitation standpoint. So I help my mom by saying, now, mom, so you may, you have difficulty walking. So you're going to potentially be covered under the Americans with Disabilities Act. We are able to get you the accessible parking placard because you have a disability. And we're able to use accessible parking spaces because you have a disability. And all of these things are covered under the Americans with Disabilities Act. Now, the Americans with Disabilities Act actually covers 5 areas. Title I is employment. Title II are public entities or state and local governments. Title III are public accommodations or private businesses. Title IV are telecommunications, and that's where captionings come in. And then Title V deals with the miscellaneous provisions. Now, the ADA also has several things that we call cross-cutting requirements. Typically, these are things that go across all titles or all sections of the ADA. And first of all is equal opportunity. When we discussed that a bit earlier, folks that have the same should have the same opportunity to participate in their community, live where they want to live, and be able to do the things that other folks do. So integration means that folks should be able to again, live in the community and to be able to make choices about where they live, how they live. Maintenance of accessible features. If you have ramps or curb cuts or parking spaces, you want to make sure those stay in good working order so that folks can use them and be able to see the lines where the accessible parking spaces are. Personal services and devices. So the ADA does not require that a place provide glasses or hearing aids or things like that are considered personal in nature. So, and this comes up a lot in the employment setting. So we have to make sure that, folks understand the difference between a personal service device or getting things such as monitors or chairs that might be more ergonomic. Surcharges means that a person with a disability cannot be charged extra for things such as sign language interpreters or materials in alternate formats such as Braille. So all of these types of things are not allowed under the ADA. Reasonable modification of policies, practices, or procedures. So we talked about earlier that we talked about earlier in under fair housing that a reasonable modification might be allowing a person to designate a parking space so that they can be closer to their apartment. Under the reasonable modifications of policies, practices, and procedures, so this might mean that a person needs to be able to bring in food or drink to be able to accommodate their diabetes. So in a place where you might not typically have allow someone to bring in outside food or drink. Other power drive mobility devices. These are things such as Segways, knee scooters, regular scooters, things of that nature. These are covered under the ADA now, so and are allowed in places that maybe they're not typically allowed to be. Service animals. Under the ADA, there are only two animals that are allowed to be service animals. That are dogs and miniature horses. And so, but the animals have to be, the animals must be providing a service to the person with the disability. And so those are the only two animals under the ADA that are allowed in. Now, going back to the statement here about an emotional support miniature horse, under the ADA, there are no emotional support animals that are covered. It's only service animals. And also under the ADA, we have effective communication, and this means that the communication must be equally effective as it is for anyone else. So for a person who is deaf, then they need to be able to request a sign language interpreter or captioning. So a person who is blind might need Braille or Braille or large print or audio recordings. A person who has a speech difficulty, they might need extra time in order to be able to have an appointment with you so that you can communicate with them. And then, of course, we need to look at facility access, and we're going to look at that a little bit more in a little bit more detail here in a moment. But facility access means that buildings must comply with the ADA standards for accessible design, and they need to be able to be usable by anyone with a disability. So under the ADA, so residential facilities are covered in a limited manner. So in this, we talked briefly earlier about the fact that common areas such as your leasing office, your clubhouses, your pools, all of those are going to be potentially covered under the ADA because they're open to the public. And some of the things that might be covered is if you have a clubhouse and with a swimming area, then you would need to look at the toileting and bathing features and those requirements. And in this slide, you have a picture in the upper right hand corner here with a bathroom that has an accessible bathtub with grab bars and operable water controls, an accessible toilet with grab bars, and an accessible sink. And in the lower left, you have a roll-in shower with a folding seat on the side wall, and grab bars and water controls. Now, landlords who receive federal assistance, and this includes public housing and private owners, are required to make and pay for reasonable modifications to the common areas and the individual units of the tenants with disabilities under the ADA. So we need to look at, so these are the common areas, so under the ADA that need to be accessible. Now, when we're looking at communication, so the picture on here is looking out of a peephole of a door. We need to look at these different types of communication requirements. So, and one of the things about the peepholes is that they need to be at varying heights. One that for a person who may be standing, one for a wheelchair user. Because remember, a wheelchair user is going to be at a lower height, so you want to be able to make sure that they can be able to see out the door. So, and also too, is that at least 2%, but no fewer than 1 unit of the total number of residential units have to provide these communication features. So how is the ADA enforced? So first of all, you can file a complaint with the Office of Civil Rights at the U.S. Department of Justice. Again, you can also file a complaint with the Human Relations Agency under the state civil rights law, and you can also pursue alternative dispute resolution or mediation. We also have several resources for you on the ADA Title II regulations and the ADA standards for accessible design, and then the ADA Title II action guide for state and local governments, an overview of the Americans with Disabilities Act, the Title II and Title III regulations fact sheet series, and then questions and answers. Now, before I move to talking about the Olmstead decision, do you have any questions about the Americans with Disabilities Act?
If you do have any questions, feel free just to unmute yourself and jump in. Give folks a few seconds in case. Okay.
All right, hearing or seeing no questions, I'll go ahead and move on. And if you think of something, feel free to put it in the chat and we can address it at the end. So now, the Olmstead decision occurred in 1999, and this is probably one of the most important court cases in the history of the disability rights movement. It was decided by the Supreme Court that forced institutionalization violated Title II of the Americans with Disabilities Act and the 14th Amendment of the Constitution. And one of the folks who was at the center of this case was a person by the name of Lois Curtis. And if you've ever heard of Lois, you may have heard about her artwork and some of the other things that she did after she left the institution. But at the age of 11, when she was put into Georgia Regional Hospital, she has intellectual and developmental disabilities, and she lived there for the next 18 years. And so, at the time, Tommy Olmstead was the commissioner of the Georgia Department of Human Resources. So Lois, on behalf of Lois, the Atlanta Legal Aid Society filed a lawsuit against him. So, and the Supreme Court said, and Ruth Bader Ginsburg wrote for the majority, and said institutional placement of persons who can handle and benefit from community settings perpetuates unwarranted assumptions that persons so isolated are incapable of or unworthy of participating in community life. And then secondly, she said, confinement in an institution severely diminishes the everyday life activities of individuals, including family relations, social contacts, work options, economic independence, educational advancement, and cultural enrichment. And if you listen carefully there, you will hear many of the 4 pillars of the ADA. We're talking about economic self-sufficiency, independent living, equal opportunity. So all of these things that are so very important to our daily lives. So we need to understand that seniors do not have to be living in a nursing home or an institution to challenge Olmstead, and they can file a complaint if threatened with removal of community-based services. So the courts have found that Olmstead applies to individuals who live in the community who are at risk of institutionalization. And as we age, so aging in place becomes a very important thing for many folks. And so in one decision in the 10th Circuit, they held that the protections in Olmstead would be meaningless if people with disabilities were required to segregate themselves by entering an institution before they could challenge an allegedly discriminatory law or policy that threatens to force them into segregated isolation. In that case, individuals who were not in nursing facilities stated they would rather die than enter nursing facilities, and that the court said that these men and women who lived in the community were protected by Olmstead. Unfortunately, what we see sometimes is at the state level that people with disabilities and seniors are often at risk of institutionalizations because of budget cuts. And Olmstead has been applied to cases where budget cuts have been put into place that propose to eliminate community services or place people at risk of institutionalization. In California, they proposed reducing or terminating in-home support services, and plaintiffs successfully argued that the state's proposed budget cuts violated the ADA and that cuts would place them all at risk of institutionalization. So, provision of community resources for deinstitutionalization means that it may require community-based housing. It may require community-based support for people with mental illness and physical disabilities. Also means that Medicaid dollars can potentially be diverted to community-based services, and that the supports must be tailored to the needs of each person. And it also may include the provision of personal assistance. Now we've got two slides, one with information on resources about the Olmstead decision. And, oops, I'm sorry, one slide. So, and then there are some additional laws that also protect the individuals with disabilities and older adults. The Rehabilitation Act of 1973, which I've mentioned briefly, and this is applies to organizations and groups that receive federal funding. If you receive federal funding of any kind, then you must comply with the non-discrimination requirements of the Rehabilitation Act. Age discrimination in employment. As we know, many of our seniors are often working later in life now and may experience discrimination due to age. So the Voting Rights Access Act, the Air Carrier Access Act, and then consumer protection laws at federal and state levels. Now, as I mentioned earlier, we have multiple resources on aging and the ADA. And so some of these are about accessible health care, accessible medical examination tables and chairs, and the ADA and caregivers frequently asked questions. Aging and the ADA, including older people with disabilities. Know your rights, the ADA and older people, and age, hearing loss, and communication. What are my rights? So, and just as a help to you, so we have also provided some information on home modification and accessibility resources, including the IRS information on medical and dental expenses, universal design, and home mods. And then housing help from the USA.gov and tips on building an accessible home. Now, if you need to reach me or if you have questions about the law or a specific situation, so I do encourage you to contact us at 404-541-9001 or 1-800-949-4232. You can also email us at adasoutheast@syr.edu or reach us on our website at adasoutheast.org. And I also encourage you to follow us on social media, as we post a lot of great information there. And at this point, I will turn to the questions. I see. Let's see. Is there a contact at Florida Medicaid that handles questions about community supports when dually eligible seniors are being denied coverage? I do not know the answer to that off the top of my head. I could do some research and get back to you on that. So
Thank you. Because I think that the possibility of Medicaid coverage is just that, it's a possibility, but you'd have to advocate for it. And I'm wondering what system is in place to advocate for that in Florida.
Okay. All right. I will see if I can find a resource for you on that.
Thank you.
And Pam, we usually send out the recording and the post-meeting information, including your handouts, probably Monday or Tuesday of next week. So if you have something like a response to that or a link or something you want folks to know, that is one of the ways we can get it out to them. And then you could also post it in that LinkedIn group if you choose to. You can do both if you would like.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Yeah.
All right. Are there any other questions I can answer for you, or any questions that you have about the ADA that you want to bring up today?
Pam, I have a question. Let me just make sure I'm not cutting anybody else off. I'm looking at the participant list to see if anybody's unmuted. Do you work parallel with like the VA or someone else that may also be supporting, wheelchairs or mobility or anything like that? Is that completely different, or do you partner with them for something, or because you both have different purposes that it's really separate?
Yeah, that's separate. So we do provide those resources to folks when they need it, but that's a totally separate group, and so we do two different things. So we don't have a direct partnership with them.
Got it. And then Pat is asking a question in the chat box. Is there a way we could get certificates for this?
I don't have a way to do that for you. I don't know. So is that something you do at the senior roundtable?
We don't, yeah.
Yeah. I would, so this is going to be a shameless plug for part of our training. If you do want to learn more about the ADA and get certificates for it. So we do have several web courses. So, and if you'll go to our website at adasoutheast.org, so there's a nominal fee of $5, and that covers your certificate of participation. But we have Foundations of the Americans with Disabilities Act. We have a course on Title II of the ADA. We have a course called At Your Service, Welcoming Customers with Disabilities, and a couple of other courses and I would highly encourage you to take those courses, and then you could get the certificates. And what we have found is that most of the time, people are able to take those and go to their own certifying organizations and submit those and get credit for them.
And that's a great option, and it's not a selfless plug to let them know that there's additional resources out there. So that's
Right.
awesome for folks that would like to know more or want to get the certificate, those kinds of things, that's an option for them to do so. So excellent. Anything else for Pam before we let her off the hook today? Anything else for Pam? I'm going to pause for just a second in case anybody's still thinking or typing or unmuting. All right. Okay. So please join me. Round of applause for Pam. Thank you for all the information. Our Zoom producer has put the details that Pam just shared with us, her handouts, in the breakout, the chat box, excuse me. So you should be able to pull it from there. And if not, again, we will send that out next week when we send out the link to the recording for anybody who would like that. We'll also include some of the information in the chat that people have put in there as well. We might not include the mini horse at the Florida Theater just to give people ideas that they probably shouldn't do that, but there you go. But that is pretty good. I have to say I'd have a big smile on my face if I was in line at the Florida Theater and saw someone show up with their mini horse. And you're probably not allowed to pet or anything, which would be
what
my instinct would want to do. But yes. Okay. So Pam, thank you so much, and thank you for being willing to be a resource for us today. As we wrap up, a couple last things. If you are here and your name is on this list, if you will give us a wave, Eustatius, I know, is one of those, etc. Janet is here, Pamela is here, and we appreciate it.
Rosa is here. It's just I can't do much on my computer. Sorry.
Got it. Well, we're just glad you're here, and that's okay. We understand that. So this group is the group behind the scenes that comes up with great ideas. We also get great ideas from people who attend the meetings that say, hey, could we put this on the list of future topics, etc. So we're always open for ideas of things that you think would be a great program for the group that you see here today, which is pretty typical of our group. So if you have a suggestion, you can always feel free to pass that on to us. And then this group behind the scenes actually reaches out and finds the contact. In this case, Linda Levin reached out to Pam to say, hey, would you guys be interested, etc. And they work really hard behind the scenes to get us great speakers, great programs lined up, etc. So huge thank you to the advisory committee. Very appreciated. And then it is time for our $25 gift card. So Catherine has donated 2 $25 gift cards. We will get those to the 2 winners after it, whether it's, I think, Catherine, are they probably electronic, where will be a link. So we'll send those electronically, and I will connect with both of the winners after the meeting is over, and I'll get you connected to Catherine. We'll get that done. So with that, we are going to head over to our wheel of names. And Geraldine, and you have to be here to win. Geraldine, are you here? Let me look at the names here.
I'm here.
Here, all right. Geraldine, you have won a $25 gift card courtesy of Catherine Nagel's organization. And we have one more.
Thank you.
We had a blank, we didn't know how to fix it. Ignore that, as the producer is saying. That's an invisible person. And our next one is Pamela Sanderson. There you go. Okay, so I will contact both of you. I'll get you connected to Catherine. Thank you all for coming today. Happy Thanksgiving, happy winter holidays, whatever it is that you celebrate, Festivus for the rest of us, etc. Very happy to see everybody today. Pam, again, thank you. Catherine, thank you for being the meeting sponsor. And we hope to see you in the future. Goodbye, everybody.